Garrett Stevens is the chairman and president of Interstate Industries, Inc., which is a conscious media company that uses the Hemi-Sync technology developed by Robert Monroe of the Monroe Institute. He, alongside his team, create tools for personal growth through meditation, sleep, relaxation, and more. He also teaches at the Monroe Institute, helping humans reach their highest potential. Thank you for being here with us today. We appreciate your time.
Hey, my pleasure, Jared. Really good to be here.
Well, to start off, on your site, it talks about human potential that you work with, and I wanted to know from your experience, what do you think is the highest human potential, and is it different for each individual?
I would even venture to speculate as to what the highest human potential is. I think, part of being an explorer of consciousness is falling in love with the mystery. And we're all endlessly mysterious. And where that leads us, I think nobody knows. And that's part of the fun of it, part of the excitement. But I think it's certainly a good starting point to consider that you're more than your physical body. And many of us are very locked into that mindset, whether we're consciously aware of it or not. And so that's really kind of the opening that we try to facilitate for people. And from there, where you take it is really kind of up to the individual.
When did your consciousness exploration start? Was there a moment that led you on this journey?
That's a good question. I mean, I was kind of an unusual child, so I would sort of see things and have experiences as a child that I thought were normal and that other people were having, and it pretty quickly became clear to me that that was not the case. But I was also very analytical and left-brained, rational, hyper-logical, and I went down a path that kind of, really played into that, leveraged that, reinforced that. I studied finance, I worked on Wall Street for many, many years. And I think, all of that kind of had the effect of maybe suppressing those latent abilities or those latent curiosities somewhat. And then, I would still kind of meditate and read books that interested me on consciousness, but it was very compartmentalized. So, I had kind of like that part of my life that was really more of a hobby. And then I kind of had my other life, which was, my work, my friendships, my relationships, my beliefs, and they sort of stayed separate. And over time, they started to converge through sort of a variety of, life events. I think, probably most significantly, the death of my father. That started to kind of prime a lot of questions within me. And then I had a spontaneous out-of-body experience while being in a float tank, a flotation tank or a sensory deprivation chamber shortly after that. And I wanted to replicate that experience. And so I started studying how to do that. And that led me to Bob Monroe and to Hemi-Sync. And so I started taking a series of courses through the Institute. I became a trainer at the Institute. And that was probably 2015. And then I actually acquired Hemi-Sync, the company, in 2017. So it was a process.
I mean, even before, because I want to get into all the Monroe Institute stuff, but
Yeah.
and even before the out of body, what were some of the experiences that you looked back on that you realized not everyone was having when you were younger?
So just kind of around the house, like I would see this woman, she kind of had blonde hair and like was wearing a dress, and I'd see her like out in the rose garden or in my parents' bedroom or just kind of around the house. And I didn't realize that she actually wasn't a physical person. And one day I was asking my mom about her, and she looked freaked out. Like,
Yeah.
What are you talking about? And like, that was the first time that I started to realize that was unusual. And so, there were a series of events like that, yeah.
When you have that happen, I mean, it's one of those experiences where I always believe that when you're younger, you're more in tune with some of these energies that as you grow, you
Totally.
become less immune, like you can't see them as much. But when you're experiencing that, what do you think, or who do you think that spirit or that energy was, and what did they represent to you as you reflected on
Yeah. So a couple interesting ideas there. So yes, I think when you're younger, you definitely are more receptive to those types of experiences. There's a lot of data to suggest that, when you're an infant or toddler or even a young child, up until the ages of maybe 7, 8, 9 years old, you spend a lot of your time in, in an alpha brainwave state, which is a relaxed brainwave state, whereas most adults are operating in beta, which is like a higher kind of vibration or a higher frequency brainwave state that is, more connected with concentration, tasks of vigilance, very left-brained. If you're multitasking and stressed out, you're probably in beta, which is really not good for you because your sympathetic nervous system kicks in and injects your body with cortisol and adrenaline. And so much of what we try to do at Hemi-Sync is to facilitate these more relaxed brainwave states, alpha and theta brainwave states, by using binaural beats. So in terms of what that particular being that I encountered represented, I was never totally sure. Part of what you're doing when you're having experiences and expanded states of consciousness is really learning a different kind of language. And the meanings of these experiences might not be readily apparent at the time that you have them. They might become clearer as life events unfold. For me, she seemed to be connected with an event that I had shortly thereafter, where I was nearly hit by a car. And for the life of me, it seemed like that car was going to make a direct hit on me. And I kind of turned and kind of cowered. And so I'd stepped off of a sidewalk. My dad wasn't able to kind of grab me in time. So this car was, running a red light and it was going to plow me over. And I kind of turned and next thing I knew, the car was going past me, but it kind of felt like it went through me. And this was at Disneyland. So there were a ton of people around. And when I kind of opened my eyes and turned around, there was this dude coming by on a tram, right? And he was kind of staring in disbelief, he couldn't believe what he saw. He just kind of went like that, wiping his brow. And so I didn't really see her again after that. So I don't know if she was my guardian angel or
spirit guide.
It seemed to me that it was connected to that event.
It's really interesting because we spoke with Paul Elder, who so he spoke about a similar experience where he said he was in a car accident and there was a spirit guide, that's how he described it, who basically pulled him off the side of the road, or at least awoken him enough to get help. So it's an interesting idea that there are these beings or spirits that maybe are just there for that specific moment, maybe so that you can fulfill your highest potential, like we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, maybe so. So maybe she was letting me know that she was there to protect me. I don't know. That's kind of my best sense for it, though.
Yeah. Well, in terms of your out of body experience, when that was happening, you're in this tank. You're going into the tank to experience something sensory that's different, but you're not expecting that. So when that happened, and you become aware of it, what does that feel like?
Yeah, so for people that aren't familiar with it, so a flotation tank is basically, it's a dark chamber where there's no visual input because it's pitch black. The water is heated to 92 degrees or something. So you kind of lose the sense of your physical boundaries, right? So your body temperature and the water temperature are very similar. There's 2,000 pounds of dissolved salt, so you're floating. And your ears are below water, so you can't hear anything either. So I got the idea to do this from Joe Rogan. So I was listening to his podcast in the very early days. And it was
he
something
loves
that he
talking about that.
Yeah, he loves talking about that. Right? And I thought it sounded interesting. And so this was kind of right after my father passed. And at that time, I just had this very deep desire to kind of go see him and to reconcile with him because we didn't leave on good terms. And for some reason, I just had the sense that it was possible. I didn't really know how, but I had the sense that it was possible, and I really wanted to do it. And so one day after work, so I worked in Santa Monica at the time, and I, looked up flotation tanks, and there was one down on Venice Beach, like right on the boardwalk. And so I headed over there, kind of late afternoon. I worked market hours at the time, so that was kind of the end of the day for me. And got into a tank, was in there for like an hour and a half. Nothing was happening. I felt very relaxed, but nothing was happening. And so I decided it was time to go. And when I kind of got up to go, I realized that I couldn't move. I was paralyzed. And then I noticed that there was a vibration starting in my chest, and it was getting stronger. And I thought, oh, that's odd. And then it sort of spread to my belly, and then back up to my head. And pretty soon, like, everything felt like it was vibrating. And the next thing you knew, like, I had this like very physical sensation of being shot out the top of my head, I guess kind of like the crown area, like through the top of my head, and like traveling at a very high rate of speed through a vortex or a wormhole. I'm not totally sure how to describe it. Words don't really do it justice, but there were like brightly colored lights on either side, and it was like kind of like a spiraling sensation that I had kind of going through this wormhole. And I just had this sense that I was going really far away at a really high rate of speed. And, it was after I had these vibrations in my chest, and I thought, shit, did I just have a heart attack? Like, am I dying?
Yeah.
Because that was how my dad died. And so like, as soon as that fear factor kicked in, wham, I was back in my body. And so I thought, wow, man, I just screwed that up. And so I wanted to figure out how to do that again. And that was kind of really what set me on the path.
So, okay, so you experience this thing that's so different from anything else, and you're understanding that there's got to be more. What's the next step after that leads you to Monroe or to his work?
Yeah. So first, I was just trying to replicate this experience, right? And so if you start to research it, the thing you want to do is create what is basically a trance state, which is a state where your body is really relaxed, but your mind is still awake. It's kind of also described as like a hypnagogic state, which is the phase when you're going into sleep, or the hypnopompic state, which is the state coming out of sleep. And so I started studying these techniques by a man named Robert Bruce, who wrote a book called Astral Dynamics, which I highly recommend. And so I did these daily relaxation exercises and body sensing exercises, mind taming exercises to create this trance state. And then I started, I was still reading and researching at this time. And I found these books by this guy named Bob Monroe, or Robert Monroe, who started this institute that bore his name. And he created this audio guidance technology called Hemi-Sync. And I thought, that rings a bell. And so I went out to my garage, where I had all my dad's stuff stored at this time, because he was kind of between residences. And so after he passed, I basically inherited all of his stuff and it was stored in my garage. And so I started going through some boxes, and sure enough, there's a box with Bob Monroe's books and with a bunch of Hemi-Sync in it. And so I started listening to them, and I realized that it induced this trance state, this mind awake, body asleep state, very fast and like very effectively. And had I known about it previously, it would have cut out, I think, a lot of the time that I had spent trying to master it just through, practice every day. So I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. And that was how I first discovered it and got into it.
So it just happened to be in your dad's like box
Yeah.
of things?
Yeah. It was like a very strange set of coincidences.
Because you never talked to him about exploring consciousness or anything before.
I mean, so kind of backing up a bit further, I think the very first time I ever heard about Hemi-Sync was when I was flying back from college. And there's an in-flight magazine at that time, I think it was called Hemispheres. It was the one that was on United. And there was an ad for Hemi-Sync, and it said something like, access your full potential. And it had kind of like this brainwave image of like your brain sort of under ordinary circumstances and then under Hemi-Sync. And so it was like coherent, sort of amplify, or coherent and matched both in terms of frequency and amplitude. And I thought, no, that's interesting. And then fast forward a few years later, it's over Christmas one year, and I noticed that my dad had a set of CDs. And it was the same CDs from the plane flight. And he's like, hey, you should check these out while you're home. I'm like, yeah, I think I will. But I didn't. And so I just kind of forgot about it. And like, it wasn't until years after that it finally kind of all came back full circle.
That's so interesting. In terms of the Hemi-Sync, so once you started using that, was it, you said it was fast, but once you started experiencing it, what does it do? Because I've read a little bit into it, I've heard people talk about it, but from your experience, like on this scale, what does it do to your consciousness when you're in that state on a consistent basis?
Yeah, so first maybe I should explain kind of what a binaural beat is and why it's necessary.
Yeah.
So like, as I was explaining earlier, modern people, we're generally very stressed. Like we're almost always in high beta, which is like a fight or flight response. And it's very tricky to get out of that, to actually get relaxed. And so we have a lot of proxies for that. Like, having a drink, watching TV, flipping through your phone. We think that's relaxing, but it's really not. And the way to kind of achieve that is to realize that your brain will entrain to a frequency that it hears, basically. So delta, which is like a sleep state, would be between like 0.5 hertz and 4 hertz. Theta is kind of 4 to 7 hertz, or maybe 8 hertz. Alpha is kind of like, I think 8 to like 14 hertz. And then beta is generally above 14 hertz. But the human brain can't hear anything under about 20 hertz. So you basically have to trick it into hearing those frequencies under 20 hertz. And the way you do it is by giving it a binaural beat. So for instance, if you put 100 hertz into one ear and 104 into the other ear, your brain automatically makes a third signal that isn't on the recording, which is the difference between those two frequencies. So in that case, with 100 hertz and 104 hertz, it would make a 4 hertz binaural beat. So that's a theta binaural beat. And in terms of what it feels like, it's different for different people. So everybody accesses these expanded states of consciousness differently. So for some people, it might feel like weightlessness, might feel like a dream state. There might just be a sensation that you kind of come out of it and you're like, wow, where was I? It's different for different people. But as you repeatedly access these states, it becomes easier and easier to do. And you can do it with greater amounts of lucidity and do some very interesting things while you're in these states. So like in addition to the out-of-body experience, you can do things like lucid dreaming or remote viewing. But just really getting deeply relaxed is kind of the gateway to all of that. So that it's just kind of, it's sort of opening up a doorway to a whole different realm of experience.
One thing that I've just been curious about in terms of opening that doorway is, so, okay, what do you think in terms of like having that ability? It clearly exists, and it's clearly, we're able to find it in a certain way. What do you think human beings as a species are supposed to be doing, if you can even use that word, supposed to be doing with that pathway? Like, is it just to better our life in this realm? Is it so that we can move more towards that realm? Like, do you have any theories on how we're supposed to use this technology?
So, I mean, I kind of view Earth as like a school. Like, I think we're basically all here in school. And we all kind of come out of this, unmanifest potential, right? So whether you look at science, which postulates everything beginning with the Big Bang, or if you're more religious minded and you believe in the creation story, they all kind of begin with this, manifestation out of nothingness,
Yeah.
right? So if there was anything, there was just this, undefined, unknowable, unmanifest, infinite potential. And I think we're just all kind of little flashes of consciousness that come out of this other dimension, and we're here for whatever a normal human life is, and we kind of light up, and we're here in school, and then it's over, and we kind of go back, and we're like bees returning to the hive. So we'll take whatever nectar we were able to collect, and we go back. And that nectar is really what we did with our life here. It's what we learned in school. Um, uh, so I mean, that's kind of the best I can do with that, I guess.
Do you think that in your experiences with that other realm, do you think that people cycle back through, like in terms of reincarnation, and do you have any inclinations on whether or not it has to do with our actions on Earth? Like, if you're a good person on Earth, for example, or whatever that means, are you more likely to stay in that realm? If you're not, do you come back? What are your thoughts on that stuff? Good and evil on Earth versus the other realm.
So I'm not big on belief systems. I'm really more about direct experience. But big experience, I think you go to school many times, just to say you have many different lives. Some of them may be in a human form, some of them may not be. But I think you go through many, many lessons. And, when you complete the lesson, there's some sort of assessment that I think we're all involved in and play a role in, that determines what our next event is.
One thing that I'm also curious about is that you talked about lucid dreaming, and I want to get to remote viewing later on, but in terms of lucid dreaming and the dream state in general, with your experience with that, what does a lucid dream feel like compared to an out-of-body experience, in as much description as you can give? And then what do you believe through your direct experience that dreams are supposed to be there? Like, are they teachings? Are they part of this class? Like, is it a recharging thing? How do you view dreaming and lucid dreaming?
Yeah, so a couple of questions in there. So a lucid dream and an OBE they can be very similar. I think a lucid dream feels like a dream. It has a dream-like kind of ethereal quality to it. It's maybe a little foggy, a little gauzy. An OBE feels more real, if that makes any sense. Like, it feels more real than physical waking reality. That's the main difference. In terms of what dreams mean, I think it depends. So most dreams, I think, are just the emptying out of your everyday consciousness. Your fears, your anxieties, your desires, just kind of spilling out in a dream. And they don't have much significance, really. I think it's important to have lucidity during dreams, like some level of knowing what's happening and to be able to recall what's happening. But the dreams don't have any significant meaning for the most part. But other dreams are different. Some dreams carry a message, they carry a teaching, and those are what I call dreams of clarity. Those are very important to remember. And those dreams tend to be rarer. Some people may not even experience them. But if you're on the path and this is something that's important to you, it is more likely that you will have those types of dreams, if that makes any sense.
Are there ways to spot those signs on when you're experiencing a dream of clarity?
Yeah, so like an ordinary dream, which like the Tibetan yoga tradition would refer to as a samsaric dream, a dream where you're just emptying out everyday consciousness. It just kind of feels ordinary. It feels, be marked by kind of like a lower emotional state, like anxiety, something like that. Whereas a dream of clarity will have a different quality to it. You'll feel relaxed, you'll feel alert, you might find yourself meditating. There might be some sort of teacher in the dream. You might be learning something. There might be a cue that, this is a dream. And in fact, many dreams have cues that they're dreams, even ordinary samsaric dreams. So you might see like, a strange animal that you wouldn't see in everyday life, like in the dream. Or you're in a familiar room and like things are like backwards, something like that to kind of cue you, hey, this is a dream. But those would kind of be the things that, I would look for in dreams.
In terms of you talked about meditation, and I know you said you were doing that even before this journey. What is a Kundalini experience during meditation? I've heard, even we talked to Jean, she's talked about her Kundalini experience. Like, is that a similar state to an out of body experience?
So I wouldn't say like I'm an expert on that. To me, it'd be something analogous to like the vibrations I was feeling when I kind of had the OBE. There's some sort of opening going on in your energy centers, and you're feeling the movement of non-physical energy, like in your person, right? A Kundalini experience, based on my understanding, is a specific type of this opening happening where the energy kind of starts at the base of your spine and it goes up that spine and it goes to your head. And a lot of people are very focused or interested in opening, their third eye, so to speak. And like, I think that kind of goes with the Kundalini experience. I think having a Kundalini experience or, trying to open your third eye when you're not really prepared for it or ready for it can actually put you in a crisis. And so I think, that emphasis might be misplaced. And, much of where people put emphasis in these types of pursuits is often misplaced. So that's not unusual. But that would be kind of the best I could do with that question.
In terms of like where you think people should be placing their emphasis on like a day-to-day basis, let's say people are just starting out on this journey or are midway through, whether it's through yoga, meditation, even using Hemi-Sync, wherever they are on their journey, what are some things that you would give advice for people on putting into place in their day-to-day life, and how to use these to further their journey?
Yeah, I think the most important thing to do is to build a daily practice. So, pick something that you can do consistently. And, you can start small. If you prefer sitting on a cushion, start sitting on a cushion for 2 minutes. And then once you do that for 2 days in a row, so you can go to 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Or, see if you can carve out time to do a Hemi-Sync exercise once a day. Maybe it's a combination of those things. But I encourage people to find a daily practice or a routine that works for them. And, try different things. So the thing that you want to look for is entering into some type of an elevated emotional state. So something as simple as deep relaxation is an elevated state. Also things like joy, love, peace, those are all elevated states. And when you experience those states, it will make you want to return to the practice, to come back to it daily. And so it's important to have that kind of reinforcement. So if you're going more than, I'd say like a week without having that type of experience, try something else. Or if you've been having the same type of practice for a period of time and it's been working for you and then it stops working for you, try something else. Because if you don't enter into that emotional state, or into that elevated emotional state, you aren't really doing much and you will lose motivation.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because people might just get complacent in whatever their practice is. And finally, I wanted to talk about, at the Monroe Institute, we found the recently released, not that recently, but semi-recently released CIA documents from the gateway process, which that opened up a whole wormhole of things that I'm just fascinated about. But in terms of your experience with Monroe or the gateway process, and if you were involved in that CIA workshop at all, like what was going on there? Like, how did that start?
Yeah, so that is a remarkable document that you're referring to. I mean, it was well before my time. So for those that aren't familiar, the government, I think it was the CIA,
Yeah.
basically sent an intelligence officer to attend a residential program called the Gateway Voyage at Monroe Institute, I think in like the mid 80s. And
Yeah.
he wrote this like 30 or 40 page document about his experience there and these various theories about how these experiences were possible or made possible. And this was kind of coincident with what was known as the Stargate program, which was, I think, a Department of Army program that was a remote viewing program. They were basically trying to gather intelligence by using remote viewers. So basically, people that could gather information non-locally through expanded states of consciousness. Um, so, I think just for me personally, it was kind of cool to see that the government took it so seriously and that they really did think that there was something there to, go to that much trouble to, investigate it, document it as best as they could. Some of the theories that they sort of used to explain what was happening, I thought were interesting. Although I'll confess that I don't remember all of them. But yeah, if you haven't seen it, I encourage you guys to check it out. I think we have it on the website, but if you just Google it, you'll find it, like CIA, Monroe Institute. Yeah.
Yeah, that one's crazy. The Stargate one too is really interesting because Paul said he worked on that directly. So he was mentioning the fact that they were able to use remote viewing to not only see things on this planet, but even to use it to head to coordinates that are outside of this
Yeah.
planet, which was fascinating to me.
Yeah, it's all pretty crazy. And again, like this is all like endlessly mysterious, and nobody is really sure how it all works. But I think the thing that it all points to is that consciousness is really what is fundamental to all of reality. Um, I think mainstream thought is very reductive in wanting to explain all phenomena through some sort of physical material explanation. And I just don't think that's where the answers lie. Consciousness is kind of what's behind all of it.
Yeah, I'm starting. Do you believe in a collective consciousness?
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, there are, um, yeah, I mean, and I think we actually have tremendous ability to influence events here in physical reality, here on Earth, um, through the collective consciousness. And I think that's why it's so important that more and more people develop a daily practice, that more and more people turn inward to do this type of work. Because we face a lot of challenges as a species. Like, I think, the future is very much an open question as to whether or not, human beings will still be the dominant species on this planet, a few hundred years from now. And it's kind of up to us that are here now to sort of make that determination. And there aren't any obvious solutions to many of the problems we face through conventional means, through the so much of it, I think, depends on more people taking up this type of work.
Mm. And then finally, in terms of your experience with consciousness, and maybe it could relate to that point on where to look for solutions within the consciousness realm, but is there one experience that you've had, whether it's through remote viewing, out of body experience, work at Monroe, that you think has been the most eye-opening or beneficial, that maybe people can take something away from, and maybe we could even hopefully use in terms of solutions?
So I tend to not share a lot of personal experience, and for a few different reasons. I mean, one, it's personal and it's relevant to me, and it may not be relevant to someone else. In fact, it almost assuredly isn't. But I think what I can share is that, again, we started with, this idea that you're more than your physical body. As you start to kind of enter through this doorway, what you'll find is that you're so much more than that, much more than you ever even considered possible. And that understanding, that realization will be the same for everyone. And so that is the experience that I want more people to have.
Well, thank you so much for the time, and I'm hoping more people watching this will at least start to implement things into their daily practice. And I'm really excited to try Hemi-Sync at some point, so I'll have to let you know the experience with that. Jean also mentioned she said she was looking for out of body tapes that she had a really great out of body experience with, but then every time she would call, they don't say they exist anymore. Did you hear anything about those out of body tapes?
I don't know about this. I'll have to reach out to her and ask her. I'm not sure exactly which one she's referencing. But yeah, I'm curious about which ones work for her.
Yeah, she said I don't remember what they're called. I think they were just called like the Bob Monroe out of body tapes or something.
Huh. All right.
But yeah, anything else you want people to know or take away?
Not really, man. We covered a lot of territory in not that much time.
Yeah.
Thanks for having an interest in this, and thanks for having me on.